This is the weekly review for the week of November 7th to November 11th, as well as this week's Sunday preparation. So, coming into the week, I was expecting a bearish week because price traded up into this weekly order block that is in premium of the weekly range, and we formed a swing high up here, displaced the lower, breaking market structure. So I was anticipating that we were going to trade up into this daily fair value gap and then trade lower to take out these sell side liquidity objectives. Um, so obviously the CPI news on Thursday changed all of that, but if we look at price on the daily, there is also a bullish narrative. Um, so there's two narratives, honestly. Um, this premium and discount from that range low to this range high, we came down into this order block, daily order block in discount, and we took sell side liquidity, right? So this daily break in market structure that I noted here um, ended up just being a raid, even though we closed with a body closure, um, which I was looking at as bearish. But this obviously ended up being bullish. So I think that this is interesting to note because I wasn't looking at this bearish, or excuse me, bullish narrative at all. Um, like I didn't even see this until the CPI news happened. Um, I was just focused on the bearish narrative. So this is good for my journal, but coming in on Monday, I was looking for longs up into premium of the daily range. So this daily range high to that daily range low. Um, Friday didn't quite trade up into premium, and I thought that Monday we could, or Tuesday we could probably get up into premium there. So pre New York session, I saw that London formed a low, and we had this H1 fair value gap and H1 order block here. So, and we also formed relative equal highs with Friday's high. And then this was just the swing trade that I got in on Friday inside that daily fair value gap. Obviously, I ended up getting stopped out on Thursday during CPI. But we had a lot of confluences here for me to look for a long setup. Just daily structure, the equal highs, and then these PD arrays here, plus anticipating the high of the week to form on Tuesday or Wednesday. But really nothing set up. New York was just all consolidation. And then I just noted this fair value gap that we had right after lunch that we traded back into it. And then we really just expanded up in the PM session. But there was no setup that I could identify here um, to take advantage of this move, which is, it is what it is. But um, like I said, the rest of the day was super clean in terms of the drawn liquidity being these equal highs. So Tuesday was a bit tricky because we already traded up into premium of that daily range that I was looking for here. and then this is that daily fair value gap. So I was watching this and did a quick analysis prior to New York, but I was at work, so I really couldn't watch much of this live. And I saw that we had a low formed in London, so when this higher low was made in New York, I was thinking that we had or were going to potentially have a bullish day, but then I also noted this rate of previous day's high. We didn't have any SMT, but we had this like 3 drives pattern, then displacement down. So for me, the narrative could have gone both ways, and I really just stayed out of the market. And this was just a lower time frame on M1 that I noted, even though I don't trade M1 really. Mentorship setup after we took this short-term low here. This wasn't a session low. It was just just a random low here. And we took that liquidity, had SMT, and then we had a M1 break in market structure, came back down into the fair value gap and discount, and continued up. So I really just didn't know the narrative here because I saw bullish and bearish evidence. So that's why I just stayed out of the market. Then coming into the PM session, I took a quick look at the charts and I saw this big displacement down after we had a failure swing with previous week's high, where US 30 took previous week's high, US 500 didn't. And I was watching this displacement down. We never really got an RTO here into premium. And then we came down and we took London low with SMT. And I saw this low resistance liquidity run. So after we had this break in market structure here on the M5, I set a limit in this M5 fair value gap right at equilibrium. Oh, was not at equilibrium. Or was it? Where did this come from? This may have been from a lower time frame swing high. Yeah, I was in the office at this point, so I couldn't really focus on the charts as much as I would have liked. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure why I mapped this here instead of being here. But nonetheless, we didn't get an RTO of that anywhere in that fair value gap after the London low raid. Maybe it was because I moved this up once we created a new swing high. But we never came back down into the fair value gap, and we came back up into this fair value gap off the failure swing high of previous week's high. Now this was such a large range fair value gap. I think it was like over 20 points. Yeah, 30 points. And it was also close to 4 o'clock. So that's why I didn't do anything here. The only thing that I noted was you could have potentially gotten in on a trade, but the normal entry would have been this low here because that was the M15 fair value gap low, right? Because this whole entire fair value gap up here is in premium of this range, but it's such a large range and the time of day is close to 4 o'clock. So to target 1.3R would mean it would have to move 30 points. and the session would be almost done. So if I was watching this live, the only thing I could consider is potentially setting a limit at where your stop would only be maybe 10 points, 15 points, and then target 1.3R. But this was still a valid setup for me. That's why I noted it off significant liquidity. So then coming into Thursday or Wednesday, I was looking that we potentially had the high of the week form on Tuesday, and we had obviously this weekly SMT, but then we also have a monthly SMT because US 30 took September's high, and US 500 failed to take September's high. So here we had a bunch of mentorship setups form, but there was no session high or previous day high taken. So that's why I didn't get in on any of these setups. But we had a short-term high rated with SMT, came back up into premium inside the Fair Valley Gap, took out more buy side, created a new setup here. So just respecting bearish order flow. Given the context that we could have potentially made the high of the week on Tuesday, we're inside that daily premium, inside a daily Fair Valley Gap. The context does make sense to take these trades, and then we see that we have a potential bullish raid off of previous day's low, but we never form a Fair Valley Gap here. And this the failure of price to hold this raid low here is just more indication of bearishness. So we just took the liquidity from previous day's low to RTO this Fair Valley Gap, and then we ended up trading lower, and that's where we got this institutional order flow entry drill in the PM session. So everything on Wednesday was respecting bearish order flow. But then coming into Thursday with the CPI numbers, I was looking, and ICT did a Twitter space, where he was also looking at this H1 and H4 Fair Valley Gap to send price lower. So we had pretty good displacement, right? So coming into Thursday, that was the CPI, right? High of the week Tuesday, pretty good displacement down away from the high made. And actually there was even a daily swing high made at the end of Wednesday's close. So everything was pointing towards bearishness coming into the CPI numbers, but obviously we had that crazy move up. But it's fine because I was just looking for a lower time frame setup to form inside this H1 Fair Valley Gap, which we never got. So yeah, there was nothing to trade on Thursday. And then Friday, I was looking, coming into New York session, I was able to be on the charts a little bit more on Friday. And because we formed the high of the week on Friday, I was looking for a retracement into the weekly range. So despite order flow being bullish the entire week, just because, again, high of the week made Friday, and during London session, there's a high likelihood that we're going to retrace into the weekly range to close off the week. And coming into New York, I was noting that we had this short-term buy side taken. It wasn't anything significant. There was no SMT here, but I saw this displacement down. So I was considering shorts, but we never made it up into a premium here, right? So I was looking at this fair value gap. We just came up into this one here, but then we came down and we took Asia low inside a H1 fair value gap and had immediate displacement up here. So at that point, we were kind of stuck between two setups, and this honestly wasn't the cleanest bearish setup. It did end up giving the 1.3R, I believe. Yep. Definitely gave that, because we had this crazy move down here as well, because there was news at 10 a.m. Now, we didn't have a M5 break in market structure here. It was just a wick, so I didn't do anything with this retracement down here, even though we had this nice M5 fair value gap. Price ended up not respecting the low of that fair value gap. So even if I took a trade here, my stop loss would have been hit. And we ended up having a short-term, or a low time frame rather, US 30 SMT. And I noted that. Then we came up here, had a failure swing with London high. Had another lower time frame SMT here with these two highs, and had this bearish displacement down. So I set limits here at this M5 fair value gap in premium, and that was obviously, or this setup was obviously in line with my daily bearish bias, because Friday made the high of the week, so I was anticipating a retracement lower. And we did dip up into this fair value gap here, but not into premium. So my limit got swerved, and we came back down into this M5 fair value gap and ended up trading higher. And what I noted was that because price was unable to take the liquidity below this raid low from the London high bearish setup here, this low was defended, so that indicated bullishness, right? So on this retracement up, I had already deleted my limits, and in the lunch session, we had this M5 fair value gap form, which ended up being an institutional order flow entry drill that ended up sending price higher. And also, again, to note that this M5 fair value gap low was not respected even on the second time we came, because now we had this bullish closure break in market structure, and we came back to the RTO into the fair value gap. So even if I had been looking to take a long in this fair value gap after this closure break in market structure, I would have still been stopped out, because my stop loss would have been placed below that fair value gap low. But in terms of the narrative, that was the main thing that I noted in my journal, was that since we defended this low, that made this institutional order flow entry drill higher probability than the short here. Because if we were actually bearish, we should have taken out this raid low, and then maybe we could have formed a bearish institutional order flow entry drill. But Friday pretty much just continued bullish like the rest of the week. And there wasn't really much else to note for Friday. I was looking at this to see if this was a weekly power 3 setup. Um, it just, we had displacement down, but it wasn't a raid like this. Price was just kind of creeping up and then displaced down, and obviously this didn't end up working out. But I was just like watching this live and noting it. I didn't set any limits for a trade or anything. Um, but yeah, that's just something I was watching. Um, in terms of next week, can make this chart a little bit cleaner. Um, Really, it's this fair value gap that I'm watching. Um, Order flow right now on the daily chart is bullish. Um, there's no question about that. We've been respecting bullish order blocks here and not respecting bearish order blocks and other bearish PD arrays. So I think that what we should be watching for is a potential mentorship setup to form inside here, inside this daily fair value gap. And that could take us down into this daily order block here. Should take off these bearish markups because they're no longer valid. So we have this daily order block here, and potentially we could come down into it and then maybe even come up and take September high. But honestly, right now, the higher time frame is not super clear, because we are now coming into a deep premium on the weekly, and we already dipped into this weekly order block once, and now we're pushing up much, much higher into it. So the bearish narrative is not as clear to me right now. So really, I'm just going to wait to see if a lower time frame mentorship setup forms inside this daily fair value gap, and see what happens with this bullish daily fair value gap here in this daily order block, and see if it ends up sending price higher, up towards September high. But really, I'm just going to see how the week plays out, because again, it's not super clear to me. But we do have a good amount of news every day this week, from Tuesday, Thursday, or Wednesday, and also Thursday here. So it should be a much cleaner week than the previous 2 weeks, because obviously the previous 2 weeks we had a crazy amount of high impact news with FOMC, NFP, and then CPI. So I think that that's why the last couple of weeks have been pretty tricky for price action. So we'll see how this week ends up playing out. In terms of Bitcoin, I noted how I closed my trade on Friday, and this ended up rolling over this week. I guess it happens. Really, I just didn't feel comfortable after all of this consolidation. I didn't know if we were going to come up to take more buy side liquidity before rolling over, but I just wanted to note the result of the closure of my trade, and it ended up playing out, taking out the weekly equal lows. And then the last thing to note is that yesterday, Saturday, on his Twitter space, ICT was talking about how we could be potentially topping out in dollar. So that's something that I'm going to be looking out for, to see if we actually did form a high up here. And and I'm just going to see if basically price starts respecting the bearish PD arrays and breaking bullish PD arrays. So we've already violated this fair value gap here, this weekly order block here. So if we continue expanding down and take the low of this weekly range, I think that could potentially be significant. But I'm just going to keep an eye on what ICT said. He's probably going to update stuff on Twitter as well, so I'm just going to be watching that. But I just wanted to note that in the weekly journal here. So we'll see what ends up happening this week. See if we get a setup in this daily fair value gap that could drive price down into this daily order block here, and then maybe find a bullish setup in here. But yeah, we'll see what happens this week.